Hi, everybody. Can you see me and hear me okay? Great. My name is Maggie Fares. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work, to live, and to meet on this territory. On behalf of Business and Arts, we are thrilled to host today's conversation on fundraising successes and challenges during the time of COVID-19. I think we have upwards of about 600 people joining us today, so this is definitely a topic of great interest. And we are very lucky to have Camilla Holland, Executive Director of the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre, as our moderator for today's discussion. There is going to be a time for Q&A, so please do use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. The Business and Arts team is going to be moderating, so we'll share as many questions as we can towards the end. We'll definitely have enough time for that. And also note that today's session is going to be recorded and we'll post it on the Business and Arts website in the next couple of days. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Camilla to start today's conversation. Camilla.
Thank you so much, Maggie, and thank you to Business for the Arts for your continued leadership in these really interesting times. I'm so pleased today to gather with some colleagues and friends who have, I think, really extraordinary stories to tell about engaging audiences at this time when we can't gather together. People who are doing really amazing work, continuing to push the fundraising envelope forward. We have 640 or so people joining us today, which speaks to an interest in this topic. I can't imagine why. I think there's genuinely this incredible need right now to be asking our community to support us. Arts organizations, from the visual to the performing and everything in between, are finding that earned revenue piece incredibly challenging in this day, and it's putting a lot of pressure on that private sector pillar of the organization. And so I've gathered three great people today to talk about that topic. So I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, and I've asked them to really talk about their a little regional context piece, just a tiny piece about where they are and what the situation is currently, and then we're going to walk around the room with some highs and lows and make sure we have lots of time to answer your questions at the end. So I'm going to lead off from West Coast. So Cathy, take it away.
Thanks, Camilla. My name's Cathy Mckenzie. I am with the Arts Club Theatre Company in Vancouver. We are Western Canada's largest theatre company with 3 venues, 18 shows, and 275,000 tickets sold annually, just to give you a sense of our size. So when the province ordered closure in BC, we were in the middle of our season with 7 productions left. We canceled our 1920 season, and in May, when BC introduced our reopening plan, we learned that we would be included in phase 4, which meant that we couldn't gather more than 50 until there was a vaccine, a cure, or herd immunity. So at that time, we canceled the remainder of our 2021, or I should say we're now reimagining what that programming might look like. And we have had to lay off or cancel the contracts of over 600 artists and employees. And the remaining employees are on the wage subsidy program. And we're just trying to imagine a world with 50 audience members. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much. Rosemary, can I throw to you?
Hi, Camilla. Hi, Maggie. Thank you to Business for the Arts. It's so important to be convening right now and talking about these subjects. So we're very proud to be part of this at Banff Centre. So Banff Centre is the Great Canadian Rockies, and it is Canada's largest postgraduate arts and leadership school. It's one of the 26 colleges and universities in Alberta. But its funding model is very, very different than the other colleges and universities. Banff Centre is one of the most entrepreneurial arts organizations in the world, and our social enterprise is our conference business. Those of you in the center know we have hotels, a big conference center, and that's a $30 million business. And the proceeds or profits help fund the art school. The profits being at about $7 million a year, or sorry, $7 to $8 million a year. So when COVID hit, guess what happened? The conference business collapsed. So over the course of about 2 weeks, we realized, oh my goodness, you know, this $30 million business, which is almost 40% of our total operating budget has disappeared. Whoa. So we had to make some big changes and some tough changes. So we temporarily laid off 75% of our staff in late March, and that was extremely painful. And we had to stop our courses over the summertime. And the fundraising team went into high gear. So Janice Price, the legendary Janice Price, is our CEO. And bless her, she got COVID. And that was very early on in the pandemic. So we had to manage without her for a couple of weeks. But before she went off to get better at home, she said, I really want you to look at the endowment and whether we could redirect the earnings from the endowment to critical operations in the short term. And that gave the fundraising team a lot of focus and a lot of drive. And so we spent many weeks speaking to our donors. In fact, I've got the data here. It's pretty incredible.
Rosie,
Yeah.
Can I just interrupt and say, we're just having a little bit of crackiness on your line. I wonder if you just pause. I know you have a teenager in the house who perhaps could provide some tech support.
Usually if that happens, it's an internet connection. So if it's persistent, Rosemary could turn off her video and that would solve it.
Okay, so Rosie, maybe what I'll do is just hold there. I know I really want to hear from your endowment story. I really want to talk about the ball. I'm just going to throw to Jayne and just get her quick intro, and then we'll loop back. Great, thank you so much. Jayne.
Good afternoon, bonjour tout le monde. I'm speaking to you from Ottawa, our nation's capital. I'm the CEO of the National Arts Centre Foundation. The National Arts Centre is Canada's home for the performing arts. We are Canada's stage. We put on 1,300 performances, events a year. And of course, like all of you, we have been affected quite dramatically by the COVID situation. The building has been closed since mid-March. We had to cancel, a quarter of our season. It has been a very difficult time for all of us. The foundation has been actively engaged in solutions, but the NAC is very proud to be a home for some of Canada's most creative artists, and it will continue to be so into the future. So I look forward to this conversation and thank Business and the Arts very much for putting it together.
Thanks, Jayne, for that quick intro. Rosemary, I'm going to come back to you. I'm just going to go loop back over to Cathy. So Cathy, when we were prepping for this, we wanted to touch on a few things, and I asked you to share some of the success stories, but also some of the challenges, because I think it's so important for our colleagues across the country and the board members listening and the staff at various organizations and sizes of organization to understand that in these challenging times, there are bright sparks and there are low moments. So do you want to just walk through the pieces we talked about, your beautiful and really inspiring Chrysalis campaign, your upcoming donor event, and the question of momentum?
Sure. Thanks, Camilla. Yes, it's funny, Camilla asked me to make a list of highs and lows, and I put down one high, and then there was a long list of lows. Anyway, it became clear right away, as Rosemary was saying, and Jenna as well, that we had to very quickly move into a high gear with our fundraising. We had a number of fundraising events canceled, so we moved those online as best we could. We had an online auction and a raffle. But every summer, we typically have a matching campaign, and I realized that we couldn't wait to the summer to get this going. So fortunately, our board and a few donors stepped forward, and we were able to put together a $100,000 match. And from mid-April until today, we've raised about $400,000 digitally, which is amazing for the Arts Club and a real testament to the support that we've seen from our patrons. That was one of the highs, actually, that I wanted to share, was just we sort of created this phone tree in our small development team of 6 to get on the phone with those higher level donors, even $1,000 and up, and just let them know what was happening, even when we didn't have answers. But just to touch base, we knew there would be many concerns about people's tickets, and it was really heartening to get the kind of support that I felt from everyone that I spoke to. So that was wonderful. And just a quick point about tickets. I think because we were able to contact so many people early on, we are thrilled to say that 60% of the patrons we've heard from have left their money within the organization. So nearly 400,000 in ticket revenue that's been donated back. And the remainder has been put on account, like a gift certificate for a future performance, which is lovely and a testament to their loyalty and support. So, you know, other than seeing the success of the campaign and the support that we're receiving, I think there was a real grieving process at the Arts Club. Of course, the layoffs were terrible. These are all people we know and part of our family. So that was really, really difficult. But also, trying to imagine a future where we are going to be prevented from doing the work that we're known for, musicals and beautiful stage productions. When we learned that our audience was limited to 50, we really had to think about, well, how could we even have a financially viable operation? I mean, we're normally a $16 million operating budget. How do we do it if we can only have 50 patrons at a time? So yeah, that's been an ongoing challenge. And what will that mean, not just in terms of attrition for donors, but what does that mean for our corporate support? How many businesses are going to want to sponsor events that have a maximum of 4,000 people coming to a show in a long run? So all of these considerations are scary to think about. But I really applaud the Arts Club team for staying focused on the future and thinking about how we can make it work. So I would say that. And yeah, I guess, you know, also wondering just quickly about, like so many others, just the future is very uncertain with the wage subsidy and other things like that. So we're really, we don't have our answers about the future. But very quickly, I will share that we have the event.
Yes, please tell us about this lovely event.
So, like many of you, we've been trying to engage people digitally, and we are excited. We now have our first 50-person event. We've created a fundraising series for the summer. We're going to do 3 of them, and we're calling the series Spaced Out, because actually we're all 2 meters apart. so we'll do a number of these, 1 a month, and the first one's at the end of the month, featuring the Mums the Word Collective. We're spending a lot of time, and it's certainly a lot of work to think through all the logistics about loading in the theater, even though it's only 50, you know, keeping people spaced. How are we going to negotiate the bathrooms? Can we serve drinks? If so, what do we have to be careful of? And not just the audience, backstage too, right? Oh, yeah. Masks, we're doing branded masks. That's the other thing, little Arts Club masks. And just this morning, we're talking about getting a little butterfly on them because of our chrysalis campaign. So, you know, trying to be creative, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot. This is as much a fundraiser. In fact, it might not be much of a fundraiser at all with only 50 people, but it will be a learning opportunity for us to reflect on what's working, what's not, how do we change it for next time, and how might it inform the entire season going forward.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cathy. That's great. I've noticed some wonderful things happening in the chat. I know that I'm speaking for the Business for the Arts team when I say pop your questions by hitting the Q&A button, because I think there's a copy and paste challenge, but we'll try and make sure we come back to those because there's some very specific ones that I know we'll want to address. Rosemary, can we come back to you? I really wanted to talk about, you had sort of 2 great celebrations and then one tougher question for you, which is tell us about this extraordinary pivot to the virtual Midsummer Ball. Talk to us a little bit more about this endowment piece that we cut you off earlier with apologies, and then tell me what's keeping you up at night.
Oh God. Okay, so
in 5 to 7 minutes.
I never get on sad stuff, but on the happy stuff. So the endowment again. So Janice went off, and we called 126 of 200 donors who hold our endowment. Bless Banff Center, you know, it has a $51 million endowment, which plunged a bit, but it's now starting to recover. And the earnings from that endowment are just over $3 million a year. We were able to get the approval of these donors to redirect about $2.6 million of the endowment earnings into critical operations. That honestly, that money is really helping us stay afloat in the short term. And then the other piece for us, we did the same thing with all the sponsorships and the summer, all of that stuff. And then we thought, okay, let's go to the ball. And we have this legendary ball committee and they're incredible. And they haven't done a virtual ball before. So we've been learning together. And so the Midsummer Ball will happen on July 18th. It is a legendary, typically 3-day event. This is now going to be a 75-minute performance with a platform called Hopin. So if you haven't tried it yet, it's more secure than Zoom. RBC likes it, so does Husky. And you can hop into little dining rooms and talk to your friends, but you can hop through the dining room so that you can talk to everybody, which is nice. It's very open and transparent. And then you come out to a main stage and we'll have a 75-minute performance of different faculty and artists and young artists that have benefited from Banff Center. So we're giving it a go. I hope it all works out. And to date, we have raised $680,000 for the ball. And of course, our costs are minimal. It's only costing us about $20,000 to do a virtual ball. So in terms of ROI, this is a great win for us. What keeps me up at night? Oh my goodness. The donors have been incredible. I don't want to exhaust them. I want to be careful about how we continue to thank them. And so our next push in August is simply going to be to thank them, not to ask them for anything, because in the short term, they have been a very big part of saving our organization.
Rosie, can I just poke in on one thing just for people on the call who might not have got it because of the sound issues we had earlier? So when it comes to the endowment piece, these were longstanding gifts to the endowment that had then a kind of dedicated purpose out of it. I think the analogy I used yesterday on the phone with you is it's the person who's given money to a ballet company to refurbish the tutus. And that endowment money has been held for tutu refurbishment, a very valuable and important thing if you're a ballet company. But you were basically saying, guys, right now the tutus are not the priority. Could we redirect right now?
Correct. So that was exactly the conversation. And just like Cathy and Jayne, we have a very small and much smaller development team now, sadly. However, we divided up the list and we spoke to each person individually. And we said, we know you give to classical music or you give to opera, you give to theater. In the short term, would you let us redirect the earnings, not the principal, the earnings from your endowment?
Great, thank you.
Operations. And they loved hearing from us because this was at the beginning of COVID and we were all feeling terribly isolated. And in most instances, they said yes.
It's interesting. You just mentioned that little isolation piece at the end. You know, I've reached more donors by phone in the last 3 months than I ever have in my life. And often they are just thrilled to be talking to somebody who isn't their husband or their partner, right? They're like, oh, somebody new. Magic. Thank you so much. So Jayne, we're next to you. Of course, you've got extraordinary work happening within the National Arts Centre platform, an incredible building and resource to Canadians that is closed right now, but this amazing piece around Canada Performs. And I just wanted you to chat about that, the sort of opportunities you are seeing through this, and then looking ahead, what are your concerns around retention, acquisition, beyond?
Great, thank you, Camilla. I want to quote the wonderful chair of the NAC Board of Trustees, Adrian Burns, who said that, paraphrasing someone else, that we are living in the worst of times, but we are working at the best of places. And so we have seen the organization come together. All of my colleagues at the National Arts Centre, who are brilliant programmers, brilliant artists, have come together. And in fact, the program Canada Performs, which was an emergency relief program to pay Canadian artists to perform out of their living room, we shut our building down on the 15th, and on the 19th, we launched this program. So in effect, we became a digital organization almost overnight, and full credit to my colleagues, Heather Gibson and the amazing team in our new media department who got the program up and running. And basically Facebook, who was our founding partner, said to us, we think artists are going to be hard hit. What can we do to help? And so, as I said, Heather Gibson, the brilliant woman who runs our popular music and variety programming, came up with this idea about Canada Performs. And we took Facebook's money and we went to talk to other donors, and we leveraged that to, over $700,000. That basically all that money that was raised was paid out in terms of fees to artists. And so, in some cases, it was the difference between rent and no rent for some of these artists. And we were absolutely thrilled to do it. And the really wonderful, I mean, it's great to give them the money, but the exposure that they got. So some artists who might, come to our fourth stage and, have an audience of 150 people, we're getting 7,000, 10,000, 20,000 views. And so that's been really fantastic. So in effect, we created a digital fifth stage at the National Arts Centre, thanks to my brilliant colleagues. So that's been the highlight, I think, for us. Where we focused the foundation with our donors was really about stewardship and that level of engagement. We have not done any new acquisitions, so to speak. We are not putting anything out in the marketplace in terms of direct mail or telephone solicitation. I mean, we felt it would not be appropriate given so much noise in the marketplace, rightfully so, was being placed on frontline services and healthcare and emergency response. And so we didn't feel, we pulled back things that we're planning to get into the marketplace as a result. We have had selective conversations with major gift donors that we knew were open to that around projects, mission critical projects, because that's where we have our best success, when we present a unique opportunity that ties, back to the mission and mandate of the NAC. And so, I'm worried next year, frankly, about how we're going to be able to deliver. We have revised our numbers in terms of what we can contribute from the foundation next year to the NAC. I just joined the foundation in 2009 when the economic financial crisis hit. And so I have a little bit of experience of what happened then. And so we're having to reforecast some of our finances as a result, but I'm having, and the team continues to have conversations with donors about mission critical activities that could still go forward with donor support. So, it's a good news. It's a glass half full story right now.
Thank you so much. It's interesting, as the weeks go on, I find that sometimes my what used to be a best case scenario is or worst case scenario is now my best case scenario. Like it just keeps shifting, sort of paneling to the left. I wonder if anybody would be willing to share, if you had to kind of take a big overall look at fundraising in the next year, next 18 months, are you thinking this is 10% off at what it would usually be, 20, 30? Does it really depend on when you can kind of get back to core business of a type? Cathy, I see you took yourself off mute. It's a universal sign that you're ready to speak.
Yes, well, and to your point, Camilla, we've done so many different financial models as time has gone on, right? Because I think our first budget was called worst case scenario, which was then now best case, right? So in each model, thinking about how many performances we can offer, what the size will be, and trying to predict. The way that I've broken it down is at giving level. So our major gifts tend to be those who are most loyal, but then, that mid-tier, what's a reasonable amount of attrition? And I think I might have mentioned before, but we're looking at, our theaters would have had 20,000 people through for one performance, and now that maximum will be 4,000. So how long will it take, with people not being in the theater, or for those who don't feel safe coming back to the theater, how long will they continue to support us before it's just not part of their habit anymore? Yeah, I mean, I've worked on many different models, and I would say at those lower levels, I'm looking at a much greater attrition than at the higher levels. So it's not sort of overall one percentage.
Yeah. But no, it makes sense, right? Your stickier patrons are at the top, and those are the ones who probably would be back if you opened your doors tomorrow, and would be passionate about you no matter what, and want to see the legacy continue. And somebody who gave you $100 once might not necessarily feel that warm until they're back in your building and feeling that kind of intensity of drive again. Yeah, makes sense. Rosie, you also took yourself off mute.
What we've tried to do, we took sort of the proportionate budget. So pre-COVID, Banff Center's budget was $72 million, and we were raising about 10% of that in fundraising. So our target was always 7.2, $7 to $8 million a year. Last year we had a banner year because of the theater renewal that we're doing, and so that project, I feel really happy that project was fully funded before COVID hit. It actually was fully funded in February. God.
Dodged
So
a bullet.
anyway, so crazy how life goes. So right now we're kind of a $25 to $30 million organization. And so we're taking the 10% rule, and we're going to try our very best to raise close to $3 million next year. So that's how we're kind of looking at it. And then the other thing I think I'd say to everybody on the call is we do know things are going to get better eventually. And if you have projects that are even in late 2021 or even into 2022, just start fundraising for them in the short term, because people want to get behind something that's going to happen. And then and in the next few months, we're going to take a look at what is our case for support around Banff Center in the next 12 months.
Thank you so much. Jayne.
Yeah, I keep thinking about, and somebody reminded me of the short story by Chekhov called The Death of the Government Clerk. And it's about a clerk who sneezes in the theater and then spends the rest of his days trying to apologize to the senior government official that he sneezed on, and he ends up dying of shame as opposed to, but the whole idea of getting people back into the theater is critical to our fundraising, because as Cathy was saying, you need to have that connection. I mean, we have a process and a rhythm in terms of how we go out and solicit for our subscriber membership level folks. So they buy a subscription and then we go out and ask them for a donation. Well, they're not buying subscriptions right now. And so that model has been upended. And so, we are taking a lot of time to engage with our donors to remind them. And I know the quote, I think, originally came from Stephen King, where he said that if you think artists are useless, try to spend your time in quarantine without books, poetry, music, film, et cetera, et cetera. So those kind of messages back to our donors about how important it is to support art at a time when people are disconnected, people are polarized. We're seeing what's happening, south of the border. We have our own issues in Canada, but art is one way that we can shine a spotlight and share our common humanity, and it is so important. And so, as Rosemary said, tell people that the future will come, that we will get out of this, and it's necessary to make the investments now in order to have great art on our stages in the years to come.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for those words. I think it is also it's a time not to be afraid to ask the people who love you to support you. I think that's really important. I think there's a real tendency right now to think that what we are doing is supplement and not essential. We gave ourselves that message when we all shut down, right? We're not essential workers. But I think it's really critical to be having those conversations with your base. There are people on the call, and we're seeing some of this through the questions that are saying, I don't have a donor base. Well, you have an audience base, or you have a stakeholder group, or you have members, or you have people who love you. And this is a great time to engage with them and to ask them to support you through in some way, right? Whether it is buying a subscription, even if you're not convinced that entirely what those shows will be, or to make a donation, or to amplify your messages, or to help in some way. I think it's a really important time for us not to forget that our donors do, and our supporters do value the arts, and that it is through their consistent support of this that we will emerge ready to thrive. I'm getting a message from Monica, who's been wrangling what I think is a complicated chat group, just because this time the settings were a bit odd, but I hear we have lots of questions, so I'd like to make sure we move to those. Monica, can I put you on the spot?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so starting us off, someone would actually, or I guess a number of questions came in for Cathy, asking her to elaborate on that matching campaign and how she believed it worked so well. And they were asking if it was an email campaign, and specifically what sort of fundraising events entailed with that. So there was a number of questions, just asking you to elaborate on that if you're comfortable.
Of course. So it was all e-blast, all done by email, except for the phone calls that I said, to our major donors. But those calls actually weren't asks initially. They were just can you believe what's happening, and just touching base with everyone. And in that way, when the ask came, they already had some ownership and engagement in what was everyone's crisis, but the Arts Club's crisis. We tend to send out e-blasts every 7 to 10 days, so pretty aggressive. Some of them had videos. We alternate who the voice is from, so an artist, our artistic director or executive director. We've done one from the board chair. I've done a couple. What I would just say is the more heartfelt and personal that story is, the better. So this time, and it was all about COVID relief. So in the past, we've had campaigns that support education initiatives or new work development, new play development. But this was really the fine line between this is dire without saying the ship is going down. So we were trying to navigate that so people didn't feel like we were a lost cause. That they didn't
you have to instill a little bit of hope when you're asking for money.
Yeah, a little bit of hope. But really what I would say is, don't be afraid to say what this means and what the impact has been for your organization and how dire it is. And then also what your vision is for a time when we can come together and use that emotional appeal to talk about, like I talked a lot about, that the theater is in the business of creating community and gathering community and reflecting on humanity. And so what does it mean right now if we stand the chance of losing that and rally to support that? So I guess that's why it was effective. In terms of the other things I was mentioning, such as the auction and the raffle, those were not part of our Chrysalis campaign. We had already gathered auction items for a fundraiser that was canceled. So we just put those online and we used 32 auctions if you're looking for our platform. And the raffle, ironically, was a cruise. The prize we had was a cruise. So we thought, no, back to the drawing board. So we thought we would have a little fun, and we did the optimal self-isolation package. So we did a new barbecue, a flat screen TV, and an iPad, because we thought, wouldn't everyone, while stuck at home, appreciate these things? And I mean, it only did about half of what we would have seen in lobby sales, but for us, it was still $15,000. So that's a lot of $25 tickets. And it was a good way to engage with people who might not make a gift, but they'd sure give 25 bucks for a new flat screen.
And did you run that through your website, or did you run it through a separate site?
Through the website and e-blasts. Again, like we would send out emails with a link to buy a ticket, but it was through our website.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm seeing comments that not everyone is able to chat with one another this time. My apologies for that setting. We'll fix that and make sure that you can see and chat with one another for the next webinar that we have publicly. Okay, the next question that I have is concerning Black Lives Matter movement. So the question is, the Black Lives Matter movement is now a dialogue across sectors and communities around the world, including arts organizations. COVID-19 has brought so many systems to a halt, particularly in the live arts. Do you have any ideas on how this great intermission is a chance to step back and create a more equitable, diverse landscape in organizations? And how can we as fundraisers help to do this work? If you have any ideas.
Thank you so much for asking that question. It was something very much on our mind. I joked with Maggie that, I felt like we'd assembled this really extraordinary, wonderful panel that had, the only diversity in the room is regional diversity, and that is not what is really required right now by us. And so I think as panelists, I actually think we need to ask to do better. But I do think there is a role for fundraisers to learn and to grow in this time, and to be prepared perhaps to have some tough conversations with donors as organizations start making the systemic change that is required. Speaking on behalf only of Manitoba Theatre Centre, and then I'll throw it to the group to weigh in, our donors are pretty homogenous, and they are not a diverse group. They are at an age and stage and financial level of security that allows them to engage with us, but we can do an awful lot better. We can have a more representative group talking about fundraising with them. Our staff is also homogenous, and I think we also just have to be prepared to engage with our donors about these issues and about the importance of arts organizations centering an anti-racist, anti-colonial center in our organization. We have to be courageous to lose the donors who will not necessarily see their values reflected in that. Rosemary, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. This is a conversation that predated COVID and at Banff Center, and Banff Center has a deep, Banff Center is on sacred Indigenous land. We're on Sleeping Buffalo Mountain. It is one of the most spectacular. The Bow Valley has been a place of gathering for millennia for Indigenous people, and Banff Center has full-time Indigenous arts led by Renalta Arluck, and Indigenous leadership programs that we've been running since the 1970s. So this was something that we've been talking about as an organization before the pandemic, and about how we can become more deeply indigenized as an organization. Then, of course, Black Lives Matter happened, and it just sparked a massive debate internally again about how can we change our organization to more deeply reflect all diversity, you know, Black artists, Indigenous artists, people of color. And, you know, our senior leadership team, God bless Howard, you know, he's our only visible minority on the senior leadership team. Howard Yang from Arts Club, Cathy, he used to run it back in the day from Vancouver. He's wonderful. But we have to do better. Our board, we used to have a more diverse board, and we had Indigenous members on our board. At the moment, we don't. We're trying to recruit, but we need to do better, and we recognize that. So all I can say is of course, what's the pandemic teaching us? It's teaching us about income inequality, health inequality, racial inequality. It's like everything is coming at us at the same time, and all I can say is we have to do better.
Thanks, Rosemary.
Concerning that as well too, if you're seeking more diversity for your board, I would really recommend posting to board link and just mentioning that you're looking to start perhaps a committee for diversity within your own board. So I'm posting the board link as well. That'll take you to the Business and Arts website. So I encourage you to sign up and make postings mentioning that you're looking to diversify. Okay, our next, sorry, I just wanted to jump in and share that resource, especially since I know.
Jayne, did you want to weigh in? And then I want to make sure I want to hear from everybody on this topic and not.
Of course, we had a 2-hour conversation this morning with our senior management team about Black Lives Matter and how we have to listen more. And like fundraising advice that I give to new fundraisers: talk less, listen more, and we have to do that. We are very proud of the track record the National Arts Centre has with respect to the world's first National Indigenous Theatre. We've done a lot of fundraising around that. We have a generous donor who has given us specific funding for the NAC to hire artists from Arab backgrounds for different projects at the NAC. So there are ways that you can approach in terms of fundraising with your donors. Like many of you, most of our donors are a homogeneous group, and we need to do better. We need to do better on board representation, on staff representation. I'm very proud of the work that my colleagues in our National Creation Fund has done. The 40 odd projects they've invested in, which is a fund to create new works and help put new Canadian stories on stage. About 18 of the 40 projects are led by people of color. So we have a mixed record. We're not perfect, and we need to do better, and we need to keep listening.
Thanks, Jayne. Cathy, do you want to just weigh in?
Sure. I mean, I'll just echo a lot of what's been said. Looking for diversity on our board is always a priority for our governance committee. And I know Ashley Corcoran, our artistic director, has been working hard to make sure that her programming reflects different stories, right? So we're telling different stories and hiring different artists. One thing I'm excited about right now, although we're at the beginning of it, and I would certainly echo people's sentiments that the Arts Club can also do better. We can be learning more, but one of the things we're doing right now is we have, we're kind of copying the Shaw Festival, so I give them a nod here. And we've hired some artists as employees during this time using the wage subsidy. And a good percentage of those are artists of color. And we're actually working with this group of artists to think about what we could be doing better. And I'm just really excited. We're only at the beginning. This week's the first week. But it's good to listen to these artists and hear what they have to say and how we can be responsive and grow as an organization. So that's all I have to add to that.
Thank you so much. Monica?
Okay, so our next question is concerning kind of a lens on smaller arts organizations. So this question is saying that it's really nice to hear from some of Canada's larger arts organizations about how they're navigating the crisis, but they're wondering if you have any suggestions towards smaller organizations who perhaps are most vulnerable right now, especially in communities where major gifts might be considered $1,000 or less.
Who'd like to take that? Rosemary?
Well, I hear you loud and clear. And I've got to tell you, the smaller organization in the Bow Valley is Arts Place. It's the community performing arts home in Canmore, which is 20 minutes down the road from Banff Center. And they have wiped the floor in terms of us, in terms of their digital engagement. They have been fantastic. They do a lot of arts education, and you know, it's incredible what you can do with very little, as we can see here today, a Zoom call. They've been doing online teaching, they've been doing online dance classes, they've been doing online performances. So I credit them as a smaller organization that's done extremely well. I also think it's all about, we as the bigs have a responsibility to support the smaller organizations in the sector, and to help in terms of mentoring and teaching, but also in terms of capacity building as we come out of this whole thing, because it's been tough on everybody, and we recognize that. And I do feel that responsibility to reach out to everyone in the sector as one of the bigger ones in the West.
Thanks, Rosemary. I mean, I think speaking for myself, I ran a very small shop and I used to be the only person in development. But, you know, I think the principles are still the same, right? You figure out who loves you based on the fact that they've bought a ticket or come to see you or come to your gallery or given you an email address. These are all good signs. They're better signs than liked you on Facebook. They're slightly more meaningful gestures. And you start building a relationship with them, and you build that relationship with them slowly and carefully and through, you know, dogged persistence. And there will come a time when that dating will pay off, and they will make a commitment to you, and you will respond very graciously and very favorably and very speedily, and they will appreciate that, and it will sort of, it's a virtuous circle in some ways. But I think that for small organizations, it's really important too right now to involve your board in those conversations. Your board knows your organization. They can be incredible advocates for you. They can be incredible advocates for why you need support during this time. And so I don't know that it's the moment to launch a massive new campaign or try something terribly risky, but engagement activities, two-way communication, finding a way to reach out to people in a really personal way is great. And it doesn't need to require something that is enormously well designed or enormously complex or enormously detailed. It can just be picking up the phone, and you would be surprised how many people are home and how many people are willing to chat and tell you why they are passionate about your organization. I did see a question earlier in the stream that I just want to make sure we loop back to. There was a question, Cathy, around refunds, and sort of, you know, as we all kind of collapsed down the cancellation piece, you were talking about a really high level of people who wanted to turn their tickets into a donation. I know there are some organizations who are coming up to year end, and that's been a complication. Sort of, what do you do with somebody who hasn't actually told you what to do with their tickets? But Cathy, do you want to speak just a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, what I would say is for us, those high level donors, not major gifts, but the 1,500 and up, We tried to talk to everyone personally on the phone, and if we couldn't reach them, email, just to, again, connect, but let them know that, and what was challenging is the message was changing, because initially it was, we're postponing, we're still going to do it later in the summer. And then it was, we're going to push everything into next season and have an incredibly busy season next year. And then it was, oh no, that's not going to work either. So anyway, communication. And then we asked everyone to consider, we just said, this is such a difficult time for us. It would be really meaningful if you were able to let us keep this ticket revenue, but we understand that everyone's in a different financial position, and we can also look at crediting your account for next year or issuing a refund. So our fiscal year end isn't until the end of August. So one of the things our brilliant marketing team did was they put together a survey, because we have no box office stuff. And we're looking at tens and tens of thousands of patrons here who have tickets, $4 million, nearly $4 million in ticket revenue for this season that we had to sort out. So everyone else, other than those donors that we spoke to one-on-one, got the survey. So that way we could take the survey responses and bucket them and slowly deal with them that way, because we weren't there to answer the phones and our office is still closed. So I know that we have sent it out a couple of times and we still have some leeway. I think our director of finance would probably say something different than I would. I'd like to, anyone who doesn't get back to us, just issue them a tax receipt. But she may feel differently and might kill me for saying that. So it would probably still stay on the books as a liability from her standpoint.
Thank you. That's great. Jayne, did the NAC have great results? Because you would have had an awful lot of canceled tickets as well. Was there? I will just speak briefly for MTC and say that we had an extraordinary amount of donations from ticket returns, but it's not a number I see as predictable moving forward. I'm not sure that I can necessarily transition those people into longtime donors to the organization, because I think it was a bit of a sunk cost given when they bought the tickets 8, 12, sometimes 15 months before. But I'm just curious what the NAC is thinking about that kind of, I gave you my tickets, now I'm a donor space.
Right. Well, frankly, there's two categories of tickets. For example, we were hoping to have in May a Hamilton, which was going to be a great cash cow, frankly. It's a wonderful show, artistically also. But and in that case, those people who bought Hamilton tickets, for example, are not necessarily our closest people. They are people who maybe go to one show a year, a Broadway show. And so we didn't feel it was appropriate to ask them to donate back those tickets, because frankly, they really wanted to see Hamilton and it has been rescheduled. So in that end, we have some disadvantage at the NAC that we don't have an integrated CRM system. And like the Arts Club, we don't have any box office staff answering the phones right now. So we have not pursued that line of inquiry in terms of turning over. And we have not, the other challenge is that we have not launched our seasons for next year. So our tickets for next season were just to go on sale mid-March. And so we don't actually have a lot of, we didn't have a lot of ticket revenue sitting on the book, so to speak.
Great, thank you so much. Monica, what else has popped up?
Thank you for addressing that one. That one was actually next on my docket. So
oh, was
now,
it? Oh, thank you.
No, yeah, great minds.
It's complicated because we're wrangling the room, but I'm also kind of trying to keep an eye on the chat. Anyway, I'm glad it worked. What's next?
So next is one considering virtual galas. So it goes towards Rosemary. And the question is, what are the ticket prices for the virtual gala? And how are you shifting your messaging about pricing when attendees aren't getting the same experiences and aspects that they would normally? And then a follow-up, you mentioned a cost of about $20,000 to put on that virtual ball. Can you give us an idea of the breakdown of those costs? We are a very small festival and don't have access to about $20,000.
Okay, fair enough. So the Midsummer Ball is a 41-year tradition, and it has been, as I said, a 3-day extravaganza. So it's not a lot of guests. Jayne's been. It's pretty great, isn't it, Jayne? So is the NAC Gala, and we all do them. But typically, it's about 360 guests that are held captive in Banff for 2.5 to 3 days. And the ticket price is $1,500 for the whole weekend. So it's $500 a day, and it's like, there's food and there's incredible art through the campus, and then there are 2 large shows and a dinner, and I mean it just goes on, and brunch at Janice's. So the ticket price is $1,500. That's a lot of money. The sponsorships are higher than that. Well, we went to each of them and we said, what do you say? And they said, you know what, we want to give to you. And they've given, like they're giving. Some of them are giving at a lower level, maybe at a $500 level, or we don't really mind how much they give to us. Typically they give $1,500, and the sponsorships being much larger. And almost all of them are giving. So it's a bit like the ticket refund idea. They love the center. They want it to survive. We've had some say, listen, if I can't come in person, please direct my gift until next year when I can come next year, which is what I was talking about before. When you know something's going to happen in a year or 18 months, just plunk the money for the concrete thing later on. Now, in terms of costs, the $20,000 are the artist fees. So the platform isn't very expensive. I think it's less than $1,000. So all of the money is going to the artists.
I will just mention a much smaller scale event, but I think one that's quite exciting for a local organization here. Manitoba Opera on June the 18th is doing their first kind of DeLuca's Dinner at Home. It's a beautiful restaurant and gathering space in Winnipeg. But tickets are being, so in this case, your dinner is delivered to your house. And so, I mean, it's in a town like Winnipeg, in June, you can do that. So people are going to, and it's got a cooking component too. I think we make our entree or something. So there's, I think there are really interesting ways to kind of pivot to that virtual gala piece or that virtual donor event piece. I'm going to be honest and say, I think they're, with the exception of possibly the Banff Center, a lot of them are going to be as much fundraisers and engagement opportunities for your donors rather than extraordinary fundraising events, because I think that it is just complicated to kind of measure the ticket price and how much will people buy, and when will people be fatigued by virtual donor events. One of the pieces that people love about donor events is the collegiality of them, and the sitting at the table and the dancing and the silent auction and the live auction, and that might eradicate, that might sort of diminish after the 4th or 7th or 9th of these in your marketplace. So I think it's important to keep an eye on what your colleagues are doing and take the best ideas and jettison and ask really honest questions about what worked and what didn't work.
We haven't announced this publicly yet, but I can tell you that the NAC Gala, which is normally in the fall, will not be in the same format as it was last year. We have a kind of a unique, bespoke series of events that we're curating. We're really excited about them, and they're going to provide our donors with kind of a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And as soon as we announce how that's going to work, I'm happy to share our learnings with a wider group, because I think it's an interesting way to approach when you can't do an in-person gala. So watch this space. More to come.
Great. Do we have time for maybe one more question, Monica? Oh, Cathy's got her.
No, I just was going to say, I mean, we're still a very large arts organization, but on a smaller scale. The in-person event I was talking about and the series over the summer spaced out, we were imagining, so this is much more modest, the in-person tickets were $175, and the streaming, if you wanted to stream the event from home, it was $20. So, that's maybe a slightly more reasonable price point.
So I'll ask another one that's really quick, and then I'll double check it within for time. Again, just being cognizant that there's about 5 minutes left. So this one was one that I saw come up a number of times, and it was concerning, I forget who mentioned it, but it was Hop-In. So the question was, how can we find more about Hop-In? Is it software, and is there a link available?
Yeah, just Google it. We did I have this fantastic web guy who researched a whole bunch of platforms, and he liked Hop-In. Hopped in.
Hopped in. Okay.
You'll either get the event or you'll get some serious beer quotient from people, but either way, you're going to be in a good space. Any other shout outs just briefly from the group? I know 32 Auctions is doing stuff. Somebody in the chat was mentioning Red Apple Auctions that I don't know. Givergy is another one. Givergy, I think, is Canadian owned maybe, and is doing
from Calgary.
Right.
We use them for the online auction, which we're doing next year, not this year. Mm-hmm.
Right. So just a few options, and reach out to colleagues around the country as you, and keep an eye on other people's donor events and what's successful in that space, because somebody will have tried it before you do, and you can learn from their mistakes and successes. I see Maggie's back, which usually signals the end.
No, I think we have a little bit more time. Monica, I don't know if there's another quick question to be asked, but if not.
Yeah, absolutely. There was one asking about how organizations can publicly and authentically share organizational and survival needs during a time like this, and everyone's in the same boat. And particularly if your organization doesn't already have a well-established donor base. But I think kind of we're speaking to that right now, in my opinion. Just all the resource sharing and idea sharing.
Yeah, and I think there's a really great question embedded in there about like how do we be as transparent and honest with how do we share the dark night of the soul that we are sometimes having with our donors without terrifying them? Rosie, did you have something to add in?
No, thank you, Maggie, and thank you to BA and to Camilla and Cathy and Jayne. It's really important that we have these conversations, and BA has really led during the pandemic. We were all on that call with Steve Guibault the first week. Like there were 1,500 people on the call. It was amazing. So I think this is super important. The other thing I think that we have a responsibility, and I'm saying this to my dear friends in Ottawa at the Crowns and the national organizations, the national ecosystem is fragile right now, incredibly fragile. And when we say we're in it together, we really have to advocate for the entire country, for the regions, for the big cities, for the littles, because we all know, those of us who are in these difficult business models that were highly entrepreneurial, it's fragile right now. So that's what I'm hoping the sector will do. And somebody was talking about advocacy. We do have to make our voices heard as a collective. And Janice was on a call with Mr. Guibault yesterday, and guess what? We're not really at the top of the list right now in terms of sectoral support on recovery, the recovery piece. So we have a lot of work to do.
It's a great point to end on. Thank you so much, Rosemary. Cathy and I were talking yesterday about, is this a moment where fundraisers also have to pull out their tools and try and apply them to advocacy? Right now it would be a significant, if we knew that wage subsidy was going to be extended for 6 months, a year, if we knew what that percentage was and could plan around it, that would be an extraordinarily strengthening thing for our sector. And so I do encourage, perhaps Business for the Arts can host another panel kind of about that pivot to advocacy that I think we're all going to need to do. I just want to touch on, I know we're running out of time, but I just want to touch and say, I think we are in the business of being hopeful. And we are in the business of imagining a better future. And, I'm not an artist, and I know that they are imagining an extraordinary opportunities to engage with audiences again. But I think that we, as institutions and as organizations, large and small, you want your donors to understand the gravity of this, but you don't want them to feel burdened by it. So I think there is a tone of candor and honesty, but not sadness. I think we've passed that window now. So, this is not the moment for your letters to open with, gosh, what are we going to do? I can't imagine. This is the moment to say, I see a future and I want to get there. And I see a more inclusive and just future. And I want this organization to get there with the integrity intact that you have supported for these years. And we need you to help us as we lead forward into that future. So I think this is the moment to tilt the tone away from, gosh, this COVID, to You know, to quote a significantly better speaker, I have a dream. It's about the end of this, and I think you need to really be building that level of hope to your donors right now, even if you don't always feel it in your dark nights of the soul. So Maggie, I'll let you thank everybody. Your team has been extraordinary.
Oh, thank you so much, Camilla, and gorgeous words to end on. I just want to share again, I know Monica's been doing such a fabulous job of posting resources and links within the chat box, so please do check those out. Business and Arts, we have been very, very active these past couple of weeks, and we've tried to host as many of these types of series as possible. And so what we have done is we've made videos, we've shared links, and so they're all on the Business and Arts blog, and I really encourage you to go visit them. We hosted yesterday a session similar to this, and it was a partnership that we've done with the NAC and also Nanos Research. It was the launch of a report to gauge Canadians' attitudes towards returning to the arts. You can find that full report for free on our website. Please, please, please go check it out. It has some great insights in there. Also, we have an adapting series, how artists and arts organizations across the country are adapting to this new normal. We've done some really great interviews with arts leaders across Canada. Again, please do check those out. And we will be hosting more series like this. So if you're on our mailing list, you'll be getting updates. And again, visit our website. I know Monica's posting them now as I speak. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and stay well, and you'll hear from us again soon.